Well, hi. Excuse me. Well, I've had a couple of days to process this now, as I'm sure you all know by now. Terry Bollea, who is known the world over as Hulk Hogan, passed away at the age of 71. And you know, it's kind of that thing where, yeah, yes, Terry Bollea was a, I mean, he might have been the first to tell you he was a flawed human being. I mean, let's just be honest here. I think we all are in some form or fashion. But yeah, it was 10 years ago that some racist rant that he had was reported as actually 10 years before his actual passing. It was on July the 24th of 2015. But it kind of makes you think. It's kind of the old saying, you know, don't ever meet your heroes because you'll just be disappointed. But I don't condone anything that Hogan said on that video, but that's not how I want to remember Hulk Hogan. Terry Bollea. Yeah, yes, Terry Bollea wasn't, as I said, he was a flawed human being. And I mean, and people have the right to feel the way that they feel. I agree. Whether you want to celebrate Hulk Hogan the wrestler, or if you want to, or if you don't, like, say, forgive Hogan for the things that he said, I totally get it. I get it from both sides of the coin, you know. But the way my first exposure to wrestling, since I grew up in like the 70s and the 80s, so my when I first started watching pro wrestling, we didn't even have cable yet when I first got to start watching wrestling. My first exposure to wrestling was probably the old Central States territory. It was we used to, where I live, we got the show called All Star Wrestling. We used to get that on Saturday afternoons, and yeah, and that was my first exposure to wrestling when I was like, gosh, how old was I? About 8, 9 years old, probably. It was like in the mid to late 70s. So I'm in my late 50s now, and I've been watching wrestling for almost all of my life, probably almost 50 years. So, but getting back to Hulk Hogan, it's like I have watched the first match that he ever had in the WWF when he was managed by Classy Freddie Blassie. I don't remember whom he wrestled, but it was like late in 1979. I would have been in like the 6th grade back then. But I was not. My first actual exposure to him was. It was right after my dad first got cable in the house that I can remember back when the USA Network back in the days when Madison Square Garden would have WWF shows like once a month, like on a Monday night. I saw him wrestle a couple times on those shows. I don't know if it's just a core memory of childhood or what it was, but I can remember him being on there twice. Once was against the late Quick Draw Rick McGraw. If you don't know who that is, look him up. And the other match I can recall, I don't remember much about it so much, but it was Battle of Strongmen, actually. It was Hulk Hogan against Mr. USA Tony Atlas. Why I remember that, I don't really know, but that was just one of the things I got to watch that stuff when I was a kid. When I was in like junior high. But did not get to see a lot of his like AWA stuff. The only probably exposure to that I had was against. It was probably in the aftermags, like Sports Review Wrestling and The Wrestler and Pro Wrestling Illustrated, that kind of stuff. That was. Well, it was kind of that, and then seeing him in the movie Rocky III when he opposed Rocky Balboa in it was like a wrestler versus boxer match. Yeah, there were a couple other ones like that too. He had one time, I think, God, what was it, like 1976? I think it was Andre the Giant and Chuck Wepner. I think it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was, I mean. Between the first couple shows from Madison Square Garden I saw, then seeing Hulk Hogan and Rocky III, that was my first real exposure to him. I did not have AWA wrestling available to me like in my part of the country. I mean, I grew up and I still live in the Midwest, but the only things I can recall is that I know Hulk Hogan was in the AWA at the time in the early 80s before he came back to the WWF, and he challenged Nick Bockel for the AWA World Championship on numerous occasions, but it kind of makes you wonder, had Vern Gagne ever pulled the trigger on a Hulk Hogan AWA Championship run, what would have happened? It kind of sounds like one of the best what-if questions in wrestling history. What if Vern Gagne would have ever pulled the trigger and having Hulk Hogan beat Nick Bockwinkel? But so fast forward to like the very end of 1983, going into 1984. I was a sophomore in high school at that time. I can remember Bob Backlund. This was before he was Mr. Bob Backlund, so I don't want the rest of OTR Central to come after me. It's like, hey, it's Mr. Bob Backlund. Yeah, so you know who the hell he is. But seriously though, I can remember Bob Backlund. He was looking for a tag team partner against the Wild Samoans, and he ends up going into the back. He pulls out Hulk Hogan, and it's like I'm just like holy shit. Hulk Hogan in the WWF. It's like, and this is even before. This is like maybe about a month before that match he had with the Iron Sheik. But it was just like, that was just his kind of his reintroduction to the WWF audience, and it's just, but then you go into, then you see they're bringing it back, and then you got the, he's already getting a world title match against the Iron Sheik, who had defeated said Bob Backlund. It was actually on my 16th birthday, December 26, 1983. And I actually saw that match too. Arnold Skola, Backlund's manager at the time, throws in the towel, and then Sheiky Baby is the new champion of the world. But one thing you can say about the Iron Sheik, he's one of the best transitional champions you could have had, to go from, I mean, kind of the middle between the Bob Backlund era and then going into the Hulk Hogan era. And I believe that match lasted it was just under 6 minutes, I believe. Then you got Hulk Hogan as your new World Wrestling Federation champion. And Vince McMahon, he needed somebody like a Hulk Hogan, because he wanted to take his brand national, where his father Vince Sr., he was just fine having a territory, and when Vince Sr. ran the company, he had dealings with the NWA as well, which was the other big company back in those days. It's like WWF and the NWA were fighting it out for who was 1 and 2, and then you had the AWA, which would have been a distant third at that time. But Hulk Hogan, he was responsible for 2 boom periods in wrestling history. That's a lot of why wrestling is how it is today. I mean, because in the mid '80s, like when I was in high school, you had the rock and wrestling connection. I mean, with Cyndi Lauper and Captain Lou Albano, who had turned babyface after he got a gold record smashed over his head in late 1984 by Roddy Piper. And you could say that Hogan and Piper, they made each other. I mean, without your super heel and Roddy Piper, you don't have Hulk Hogan as this mega babyface, and they kind of made each other. I can remember those 2 matches they had on MTV. I think one of them was like the brawl to settle it all, and then you had the war to settle the score. And those are, I mean, the fact that MTV was carrying WWF, and then you have Cyndi Lauper involved and that kind of thing, and it's just like, how big is wrestling becoming? And I can remember when Hulk Hogan was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1985. Then also Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, the night before the very first WrestleMania, hosted Saturday Night Live. I actually remember I don't remember a lot about that show in and of itself, but just the fact that you had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T on there before the very first WrestleMania, I mean that said a lot. But I mean, just talking about how big of a name Hulk Hogan was, it's like you did not have to be a wrestling fan to know who Hulk Hogan was. I mean, he was just that ingrained into the. I mean, he was a household name without. Even if you did not watch wrestling at all, you knew who Hulk Hogan was. And you had WrestleMania probably doesn't happen without Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon Jr. Then you look at some of the rivalries that he had in his original, not his original run, not like the late 70s or early 80s, but I mean when he came back in like the mid 80s, I mean gosh, some of those feuds that he had. Roddy Piper, King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 2. Oh gosh. Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. They drew the largest crowd in the history of wrestling at that time. I mean, yeah, that passing the torch moment from Andre to Hogan. I can remember calling. You remember if you're an older person like myself, you can remember calling a 900 number to get the results of a pay-per-view or something like that. I had to call this because I wanted to know if Hogan was able to beat Andre. Oh, I mean, yeah, there were a ton of other matches on that card, but this is like that was the match. Hulk Hogan against Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, March the 29th, 1987. I was just out of high school, and I mean, there were so many other things that came up in his original run. I mean, he headlined the first Survivor Series, which was like in the fall of 1987. It was Thanksgiving night of 1987. Then later on, in the next year, It was like late August of 1988. You had the very first SummerSlam. The Mega Powers against the Mega Bucks. Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth in their corner. Then you had the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant with Bobby the Brain Heenan. And Jesse the Body Ventura was the guest referee. That was huge. I mean, some of this stuff was just so huge. Then you had the feud with Savage, which went into going in, which kind of set up WrestleMania 5 because he had lust. You got lust in your heart for Elizabeth. But I mean, going back to, I failed to mention like the main event, which happened on February 5th, 1988. It was on live television. It was on NBC live from the old Market Square Arena in Indianapolis. I can remember watching that as a college student. I watched that. I watched it that night. How much did it cost for the plastic surgery? But that was huge. That was like the first time that professional wrestling had been on national television in God knows how long, and they drew 33 million people. They had 33 million viewers. That's just insane for that amount of time. But then you had other feuds. That, I mean, he had a feud with Earthquake coming in 1990, and it's like, then later on, some of his other feuds, he had that feud with Sergeant Slaughter when he was the Iraqi sympathizer. And then I think there's one thing that they missed out on, and this is after Ric Flair went to the WWF in the fall of 1991. Instead of having Ric Flair against Macho Man as one of your main events, and then you had Hulk Hogan going up against Sid Justice, as he was known back at that time. It's like they had a golden opportunity, I thought, to have Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair be the main event of WrestleMania 8, and to me that is still a missed opportunity. But then eventually he ends up going to WCW like in I think it was like July of 1994, and he was responsible for. I mean, there's a lot of other people that left the WWF to go to WCW at that time because they were getting. Hogan was starting to get. They were starting to get guaranteed contracts. I mean, Hogan's first match in WCW ends up beating Ric Flair for the WCW World Championship. Then, a few months later on that year, you got Macho Man coming to WCW. Then you have other people coming back to WCW, like Lex Luger came back on the very first Nitro. 1996, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall leave the WWF, and then which would bring me to Bash at the Beach, 1996, and then you had the mother of all heel turns, Hulk Hogan, Mr. Train and say your prayers and believe in the God and everything. Turns heel on Macho Man. Turns out he was the third man in that match against Macho Man, Randy Savage, it was Lex Luger and Sting, and that was one of the biggest heel turns, if not the biggest heel turn in history. I mean, yeah, John Cena turning heel earlier this year. That was pretty big too, but that pales in comparison to Hulk Hogan turning heel. And that and him reinventing himself like that. I mean, that this is like this would eventually come the second big boom in wrestling that had happened during his career. Because like WCW Nitro they beat Raw in the ratings for like 83 straight weeks, and that brought about the Attitude Era. Then I think one of the biggest things that eventually led to the downfall of WCW was the Finger Poke of Doom, January 4th, 1999. I mean, of course there were other factors involved with that, but I think that kind of got the ball rolling with that, with the downfall of WCW. There was a couple of years ago. There was a show. It was called "Who Killed WCW." It was a 4-part series that was on Vice TV, but then after WCW died, the NWO ends up back in the WWF, which would eventually, right after, I believe it was like right after WrestleMania that year in 2002, it became WWE, and then he came back to the WWE with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the original NWO, and then he had the greatest match of all time, Hulk Hogan against The Rock at WrestleMania 18. And yeah, Hogan was supposed to have been the heel at that time, but you wouldn't have known it the way those people in Toronto were. I mean, they were cheering Hogan like it was the second coming. Yeah, I mean, it's like still like the beginning days of Hulkamania, but then of course he ends. He's in the WWE till what, about 2000? Oh gosh, I forgot how long he was there, but then he ends up going to TNA, and then like forming the group Immortal and all that stuff. But I mean, you can definitely say what you want about Hulk Hogan as a person, and you wouldn't be wrong. Or Terry Bollea, the person. I think Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea were two different people. And I mean, no matter what you might think about him personally, you cannot take away from the fact that Hulk Hogan was the biggest attraction in professional wrestling history, business, period. It's really not up for debate. I mean, yeah, Ric Flair might be the greatest wrestler of all time, but I think Hulk Hogan is probably the biggest showman of all time, probably the biggest superstar of all time. Yes, there are other contenders for that crown. I mean, you could definitely involve Ric Flair in that conversation. You could involve Macho Man Randy Savage in that conversation. As far as some of the other today's wrestlers, they don't come close. I mean Cody Rhodes, John Cena, Roman Reigns. Yeah, they don't. I mean, they're big names. Don't get me wrong, but they're not Hulk Hogan. They're not Ric Flair. Those to me are the two biggest names in the history of this business, of the professional wrestling business, and that's just all there is to it. But I just wanted to get on here, and I know I've been a little bit wordy and everything, but I just wanted to give you all my thoughts about the passing of Hulk Hogan and kind of what my memories of him were. I want to remember him as one of those iconic figures. He in a land of like larger than life figures back in the WWF days, like in the mid '80s and that, he was the larger than life character. I mean that's just all there is to it. But that's how I want to remember Hulk Hogan. Not this guy that had these flaws and then going on some racist rant and that kind of thing, but the Hulk Hogan I want to remember. I mean, and I will be honest, I mean, he wasn't my all-time favorite because that's Sting. But as far as his Hulk Hogan's legacy, it may be complicated in some ways, but just as a wrestler, his effect on this business will go on forever, and so will Hulkamania. Hulkamania will last forever. Some people might not like that, and some other people will love it. Other people will love it. So, anyway, I am still Marvelous Mark, believe it or not, even though I don't do this very much anymore. But when something like this happens, I felt like I had to make a video on this. So, I hope to do another video in the future.